Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1981. We're going to be taking a look at Billy Squier and he's going to be performing Lonely is the Night. So let's get Billy and the guys up on screen and see how they get on.
There's no one left to call. You feel the time is right. Say the writing's on the wall. Time's on the fight. Walls are closing in. All at once you like. Stuff you got to wear. Lonely. Spirit sinking down. Finding out the only in this town. Headlights screaming, it's not a cold time. Headlights, chill your mind. You can see it, shots from the side. Let your feelings bubble your heart. Stage around tonight. The band is on the prowl. Good to dynamite. The boys are set to prowl. Lonely is the night. Hear the voices call. You're ready for a fight. Gonna take it all. Something shooting, waiting online. No time, changing your mind. Streets are ringing, walks through the sound. Let your secrets follow you down. I was watching it, baby. Show what you can do. I was stopping you, baby, from making it too. One dance will show you now, baby, what the music can do. One dance will show you now, baby, look at you.
I'm just going to jump in here before the guitar solo. This performance and the overall show, such a great sound live, and this kind of performance where It is so ad-libbed, and you just get the impression that it's a great band, just having a great time. This theme runs all the way to the beginning of the song, where Billy hits the opening chord, provides the vocal, and then stops. But everyone knows what song we're about to get into. But it's just having that totally live feel to it, and being so instinctive when a band's playing, that they can just play and stop whenever they want to. There's no backing track going on here, and there's no miming. It's just such an authentic performance because it's just pure musicianship from beginning to end. The other thing is that when Billy starts to sing, you hear elements of other people's voices within his delivery, but also the tonal quality that he's got. And when I do say about hearing other singers, one of those that comes to mind, probably not as much as Robert Plant, dare I say. I'm not going to be comparing the two vocalists because they are completely different singers, but there are tiny bits of Robert Plant's delivery and vocal tonality in Billy's voice. And it's something that I find also with David Coverdale from Whitesnake, having these great singers that have parts of their voice that just overlap for a fraction of a second. If you want to continue that theme even further, you can say about Jimmy Page and the Les Paul that Billy's playing as well, getting that similar sound to the riffs going on. Like I said, I'm not comparing the two bands and any of the playing and vocals, but there are just hints of expression that you hear that are shared between one artist and another artist, and especially when they're playing genres and riff-based material like we've got here, those little similarities are always going to be found amongst the top bands because they get to such a level that they overlap at that kind of quality. As you guys already know, you're never going to be listening to a mediocre band that remind you of Led Zeppelin or Billy Squier, because you have to be at a particular level to even sound like them 10% of the time. So it's something interesting about Billy Squier that has stood out to me, especially with this live performance as well. Getting the vocal down live and the harmony vocals as well with this 5-piece setup we've got is so impressive when you're listening back to the original record, and that version of this song in particular. It really does show you how they got it down in the studio pretty much exactly as they play it live because of the quality that we get with this live performance. As you can probably already tell, this kind of music is right up my street, especially a fully live performance like this, and it's that blending of technical ability and melody and strong songwriting, because once you combine those three things together, you're always going to get a good result. And then put the entertainment side into it as well, and Billy had everything down live. You can tell that a lot of years have gone into this, honing his craft, because during the 80s, Billy would have been in his 30s, so it wasn't as if he broke onto the scene immediately after he started playing. He'd been working at it for a hell of a long time, and then by 81, 82, we're talking about 31 and 32 years of age, he's already been playing for years before actually getting up on stage in front of a lot of people and making it what I'd say in the public eye to an extent where he's known nationally, but because of all those years spent honing his craft and perfecting it, it means that once the time comes, he can put on a live show, and he is already the finished article. We've got a super tight performance across the board here from the whole band. Like I said, it's a 5-piece setup, Bobby Schoenert on drums and Doug Lubin on bass, holding it all together, and then everything else layered on top of that. We've also got Alan St. John, who's playing keys here, filling in all of that frequency, but also with the backing vocals that Doug is helping out with. So solid live. Like I said, you're getting such a great representation of the original record in a live situation here. And another person to mention is Jeff Golub on lead guitar, because he's about to come in for a solo. And just listen to the control he has The mastery of blues scale and bends and vibrato as well. There is such control in his playing, and he really is one of those players that when he has a solo, he shines because he plays exactly what is needed for the performance and for the composition. And with this live performance, there is going to be an extended solo at the end as well. Like I said, it's right up my street because I love extended solos. We will be getting back into that in a second, and at the end of the video we'll cover a little bit more of the history behind Billy and his music career, but let's get back into this performance now. And there we have it. And that whole last section, they could be doing that all night, because when you've got players of this ability, like I said about Jeff's solo, he can just keep on playing, just give you one more line, and all of the bends, the control of the vibrato at the end is always one of those things that you can look out for with guitar players, with that consistent control of vibrato to the point where they've lost the sustain on the note, but you can still hear that string scratching on the fretboard, but still with that even expression, that even frequency, and all of the control that's going on there. So great solo from Jeff. And a great performance across the board here. But putting the spotlight back on Billy because he had his first live performance when he was 18 years of age in 1968. And I think it's a common theme for musicians that once they're out of school, they just set up a band as quickly as possible, start playing. And that's exactly what Billy did. He set up the band Magic Terry and the Universe in 1969. And then in 1970, he founded Kix. And that had Jerry Nolan in on drums, and he would go on to play drums for the New York Dolls. So he then formed Piper in 1976, and they released 2 albums. They were also signed to the same management company as Kiss, which meant that they got a lot of exposure because they were able to support Kiss on their 1977 tour, and they opened up for them. In 1980, Billy signed his deal with Capitol Records and released Tale of the Tape. Bruce Kulick from Kiss also did work on that album, and it's probably best known for the big beat. And that song, or that beat, as a drum beat, has been the most, or one of the most sampled drum beats ever, because it always pops up, especially seemingly in rap music, and it's not something that I'm an expert on, as you're probably aware. So it gets to the point where not only are melodic components being sampled in rap music nowadays, but also a drum beat such as the big beat. Because it is such an iconic beat, people already know it, and if you can release something that people already know and they recognize, it means that you're going to make more sales. And even better than that, if it has been proven successful in the past, it means that it probably will be again, and the younger generation will start to tap into whatever there is about it that connected with so many people 30 or 40 years earlier. And that's certainly what happens with a lot of the tracks nowadays. It's one of those things that you can start to analyze it and think that in the studio, they're not even thinking of an original drum beat for a song. They're choosing something that's already been played for the backing of their track. And I would love it if the mainstream music industry came up with original material all the time, and it was standalone because it was just so good, and it could be as good as the other songs that were made 30 or 40 years ago. But unfortunately, with the mainstream recording industry, if they know that something works, and this is why you have so many compilation albums released almost yearly for different artists, because it's the same songs that they're releasing because they know people like them, but just in a different order on a CD, and they'll make a lot of sales. And that's exactly the same principle with sampling. In 1981, he released Don't Say No, and that was a massive album. It went platinum. That's the album that this song is from. Also, The Stroke was a top 20 hit, and it got into the top 5 in Australia. He also released My Kinda Lover from that album, another massive hit, and Billy was in regular rotation on MTV. In 1982, he followed this up with Emotions in Motion, which was another massive selling album. That went platinum as well and was a top 5 album. The title track from that album, he shared the vocals with Freddie Mercury and Roger Taylor. The cover art for the album was done by Andy Warhol, and he also supported Queen on their tour in 1982 on the North American leg of it. In the 1980s, he was having headline tours with The Who and Foreigner, and he also introduced Def Leppard to the US crowd, and that was on the Emotions tour. In 1984 is when he released Signs of Life, and this turned into his 3rd consecutive platinum-selling album, so another massive hit. We had this release of Rock Me Tonight, and that went to number 1 on the rock charts, but it was a song that had a very particular style of video with it, and it was seen as, by some people, the beginning of the decline in the popularity and the sales that Billy Squier experienced, because at the time I mentioned about MTV and how important it was in the 80s and the mid-80s to be in regular rotation on that TV channel, but also to have good music videos. And it just so happened that for Rock Me Tonight, Billy was just in a room, and for the most part of the video, he does start playing with the guys in the band towards the end of the video, but it's mostly him walking around a room and dancing. Rock Me Tonight was definitely one of those songs that for me has a hint of David Coverdale in the vocal in bits and pieces, but also if you're watching this video, you can go and listen to Rock Me Tonight and watch the video here on YouTube and see how it correlates or doesn't correlate to this live performance and the identity that you get here with Billy and then with that music video, because I think it's certainly a case that Billy wouldn't have been in control of the artistic direction that the record label were making for him at that time with that music video especially. But anyway, in 1986 he released Enough Is Enough, and that did okay, a decline in sales, but let's bear in mind that the previous 3 albums had gone platinum, so keeping up that kind of hit rate is always going to be tough. In 1989, Here and Now was a top 10 album in the rock charts, so that was popular again. It's always going to be compared to those platinum albums, but it was an increase in sales. The thing about the Creatures of Habit album in 1991, that only got to number 117 in the charts, and it was criticised for being too like the earlier releases and earlier sound that Billy Squier had. And for me, that is the whole point of being an artist, is having your own sound and staying true to your direction. Especially considering that the initial decline in the music had been attributed to that music video that I mentioned earlier, where it was a total departure from the identity that people had attributed to Billy Squier previously. But now when he goes back to his original sound, they say it's too much like the original sound, so it seems like you can't really win. In 1993 he released Tell the Truth, and this was his last album with Capitol Records, and they weren't promoting his albums at this point, including this new release, so obviously it didn't sell very well. Billy left, and in 1998 he released an independent album, and that was called Happy Blue, so that wasn't on one of the major labels. In 2006 is when he joined up with Ringo Starr and his all-star band. But it's great to have a look back at Billy Squier and the band in full flow back in 1981, so this would have been just a year after he signed that deal with Capitol Records, in full flight, but already the finished article, and so tight live. Like I said, this is right up my street, this kind of performance. Guitar solos, great vocals, harmonies, great rhythm section. It's all there for me. But thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!